We just got announced our new fusion that is coming for Christmas inside Raid Shadow Legends, and we're going to be talking about Lady Noelle today, going over her kit and my initial thoughts on her. So as you can see, she's a legendary Void support champion. I do apologize for the bit of pixelation that you're going to have with these skills there on this side, I suppose. I'm not a official content creator inside Raid yet somehow, so I don't get access to the nice infographics and stuff like that that they post early for the CCs to make use of, so I essentially just have to use secondhand assets, so to speak. But we have an A1 Ice Crack staff, attacks one enemy, has a 100% chance when booked of placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. Also decreases the target's turn meter by 20% if they're under a freeze, and these effects cannot be resisted if Sir Nicholas, which is her companion champion of course, is on the same team. Now what's interesting about this is I listened to Nubraids talking about this champion. He said that there was confirmation coming from Plarium, or the devs, that they do not have intentions to rework Sir Nicholas, and that is kind of an issue because Sir Nicholas currently has nothing in his kit that gets stronger when Lady Noelle is on the team, so they're not much of a companion duo. He's a very kind of like old school champion that has certainly been power crept since then, since when he came out as well. So his kit is definitely a little bit weaker than it could be, certainly. So it's a bit disappointing that they're not going to do something to buff him and bring him into today's meta. And that's just something to keep in mind while we read through the rest of this kit as well. So for an A1, 100% chance of block buffs is very nice. This is going to be nice for something like, say, for example, Chimera, when you're going against the phases that can steal your buffs and really, be annoying, essentially, right? I believe it's the Viper form that always takes the counterattack from my Newt unless I turn off that skill, which it's annoying to say the least. And then decreasing the target's turn meter by 20% if they're under a freeze. I do struggle to kind of find an area where I think that would be useful. Obviously, she does bring some freezes and stuff like that in her kit, but you can't really use this in, for example, Fire Knight. It will be nice in just regular PvE, I suppose. However, keep in mind that freezes do actually reduce the damage taken by, I believe, 25%. And she's not bringing any sort of damage boosting capabilities in her kit, as far as I know. So sometimes, unless you're running like a fire and ice composition where you're HP burning them and then freezing them inside the spider, you might actually want those turns to cycle. So that's just something to consider as well. Going down, she has Invigorating Chill, which seems to be absolutely insane. It's an A2. It's on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. Target an ally. If the target ally is under a sheep, removes it. This is the first champion in the entire game that can remove a sheep debuff. If they're not under a sheep, removes all debuffs from them instead. If they're not under a sheep, debuff heals them by 50% of this champion's max HP. Also heals all allies equal to 50% of any surplus heal, which is absolutely, insane. So removing the sheep, and then if they're not under a sheep, a full cleanse as well as a heal is very, very strong. If the target ally is Sir Nicholas, instantly activates his Goodwill skill, then places an increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. Now what this means is when you have that Goodwill skill activate, you're going to get an unkillable for 2 turns as well as a continuous heal, a 15% continuous heal. Now this is on a 3-turn cooldown. So again, Nubraids mentioned this, but essentially if it does not matter that his skill is on cooldown or not, you can essentially have a permanent unkillable with those 2 champions inside your team, because obviously she can go first, activate his A3, that gives unkillable for 2 turns. He can take a turn and then, do some damage or whatever, and then he can essentially come back, and on his second turn he can then activate his unkillable, and then during that time she can essentially be cycling as well to keep that unkillable up basically forever, right? So this could be quite interesting because inside Chimera, for example, unkillable is very, very, very strong, provided that you have not activated, or that you have not essentially completed enough trials to allow the ultimate form to ignore the unkillable, which is very possible. But essentially, if you have champions that are tanky enough to get through that unkillable phase, you could technically bring just this champion as well as Sir Nicholas and essentially just 3 other damage dealers on the team, right? Which would be absolutely insane. You're probably going to want somebody that can do decreased defense as well. I don't think Sir Nicholas does that inside his kit. And I mean, it's insane possibilities there, right? Apart from that, though, this could also essentially just make Clan Boss an absolute joke, right? So having that permanent unkillable up is just, it's going to do great things for your team. That being said, though, of course, Clan Boss is essentially kind of a joke already with Wixwell. You can essentially just run Wixwell and like 4 naked champions, which is pretty crazy. So this is a decent skill. It's very interesting, and you'll see that it does synergize well with her kit. And everything else aside, having a sheep cleanse is absolutely insane. I can already see use cases for this because, for example, I have a Taurus that goes into battle against, orc champions, and I believe maybe demon spawn. There's a few factions that he places a fear on automatically, and sometimes he does get sheeped because of that. So if I had Lady Noelle coming in, removing that sheep debuff from him, that's going to be absolutely insane. What I am curious as well is if this part of the skill is secondary. So, for example, she removes the sheep as the first part of the skill, and then she heals them and everything like that after. Because if I could then heal the Taurus after he's been sheeped, that would be absolutely insane. A3, Hearthkeeper. This is going to be on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. Revives all dead allies with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, then has a 100% chance when booked of placing a freeze debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. Will place the freeze debuff even if there are no dead allies, so this is just essentially an AoE freeze. Worst case scenario on a 3-turn cooldown. Best case scenario, it's an AoE revive, AoE freeze on a 3-turn cooldown, which is pretty insane. And then obviously 50% HP and 50% turn meter is a very strong revive, all things considered. It's up there with the likes of a Duchess, right? You could potentially argue that it's a better revive than a Duchess because Duchess doesn't bring any turn meter. However, she does obviously bring the perfect veils that are going to keep them kind of pseudo-protected. And then Pythion has essentially the same revive, except he also places a strengthen on your team, but this control instead is going to be insane. And what's strong about it is this debuff cannot be resisted or blocked if Sir Nicholas is on the same team. So you run these two together inside Arena, and let's say they have like a Duchess and maybe a Galathier and some crazy champions like that on the enemy team. If you revive with her, which if you put her in Stone Skin, that's going to be very easy to do, right? She then places an irresistible freeze while the rest of your team can essentially have a little bit of time to get to their next turns, which is pretty crazy. Cryomantic Queen, her passive, decreases the speed of enemies under freeze by 10%. When a sheep debuff expires on an ally, fills their turn meter by 50%. And if there are multiple champions on the team with this skill, these effects will only activate once, which is kind of just, what we expect to see there for the skill, of course. This is very, very strong. I'm interested to see the play testing of her, if this is going to be coded as when she cleanses a sheep, it's also expiring, right? Because that would make this so much stronger. And then finally, her aura, which you can kind of see there at the bottom, increases ally speed in arena battles by 30%. That is super strong. That gives her an aura that's on par with an Arbiter, and we're almost certainly going to have a soul event for this, where you can probably get up to a 5-star awakening like we've had with the rest of the champions so far. So you could get yourself a 5-star intimidating presence on a champion that has a 30% arena speed aura. I don't know about you guys, but I am certainly going to be trying to go for this fusion, and I am very excited to see how she actually plays. Those are my thoughts on it. I'd be interested to hear if you guys are going to be going for it. I think she can benefit players at almost all levels of the game, right? There's not a lot of champions inside the live arena that can ignore unkillable currently. So as long as you have a decent amount of resist on your team with her revives, and Sir Nicholas is unkillable, and her activation of unkillable, you could very well keep a team just, going indefinitely against whatever enemy there is. And then Sir Nicholas, part of this duo, is a damage dealer, and you can easily bring in a second damage dealer or whatnot, right? So overall, very, very, very strong kit, and she is worth going for, in my opinion. Absolutely, because she's the first and the only champion so far that can cleanse a sheep, which we all know how annoying sheep is inside the arena, so that alone makes her a top tier, top shelf legendary, in my opinion. That being said, though, like I mentioned, let me know down below what your thoughts are on her. Thank you guys all so much for watching. See you next time.